And it's because, again, it's this cool tin, tin, tin can, which is handy. You can throw it, it's indestructible. You can throw it. And, actually, one of the favorite places you'd see it for these guys, after about 1942, 43, well, nobody's got a gas can. Nobody's got a gas mask anymore. They're probably all unserviceable, and everybody's just sort of complacent. We're not going to be using gas in this war. And in fact, they didn't. So you'll see guys will have like extra water bottle, throw their chocolate in there, maps, condoms, anything else that they incidentally want to have, just doing want to have stuff in their pockets, they'll throw in here.
So they're carrying the canister, so they pass inspection,
the canister,
but but the mask is lost somewhere.
I'm trying to think. In the war, when was the last time any of the leadership was really conscientious about making sure the troops had their gas masks? Probably sometime in 1942. Certainly by 43, they're not. They got bigger fish to fry. The war is.
I know that was a joke in one of the Francis the Talking Mule movies. 2 Japanese in a lonely outpost in the middle of the Pacific are not going to launch the first gas attack of the war against you personally. Get rid of it.
It was kind of the mentality of the Germans too. It's like, okay, we're carrying enough crap with all the grenades and everything else we're carrying. So, yeah, I actually have a 1 liter water bottle I put in there because the problem with the water bottles was that like everything else German, it's so damn over-engineered you can't get to it on the march. This is great for you're stopping for about a half an hour and you can have your buddy help you get your canteen off of your rig to take a drink. But it's terrible on the march, so they would try and carry some other bottle of anything else where they could get to more handy than that. And also, it's not that big. I think in Africa they may have 1 liter bigger canteens because they.
Still, in the desert, 1 liter isn't much.
Well, you keep refilling it. That's why you got That's why you got these guys. You got the 20 liters. Most of the warfare in Africa actually occurred along the coast where you do have wells. Some of the fiercest fighting, at least at a localized level, would be over a really, really good well without any salt crap in the water, because most of the wells were like, you got to throw that powder in for the stuff to be drinkable. Whereas if it is known that, there's a sweetwater well, there's a low salinity well, you'll lose 10 guys taking that damn thing for the next 30 days.
Okay, and I see you got a dog tag there.
Oh, yeah, the typical dog tag. Yeah, their system was to have it kind of serrated in the center, two identical type data.
One with the body and one back home.
Blood type, the unit, well, not the unit I'm in, but at least my unit of record with the German Army, which was probably the replacement training battalion I came out of, and an identifying number individually. We put the last 4 of our social security number on it just because that's what Americans do anyway. To make that. So yeah, it's basically, it is accurate because it's got a blood type, just no Rh negative. There's no plus negative because they didn't really know about that yet. So it's going to be A, B, or O. And then if, kind of like our tags, we had 2 tags. So soldier dies, one goes with his unit leader, passes up the chain, as he's reported dead, and the other one stays with the body. So in case later on in the future, if he's buried in the field,
we can haul him home and
at least you're going to find a skeleton with an aluminum tag on it that tells who it is. Same thing with the Germans. The Russians had a different system. They're still digging up bodies west of Moscow to this day from the 41 defensive battles because they lost tens of thousands of men.
Yeah, I've heard there's a pile of bones the size of a county there.
It was they were wiped out by the Germans, and the Germans just basically threw them into, because of the disease and everything, they just threw them into the trenches they were trying to defend, buried them over, kept moving. And it's kind of odd that they didn't, during the Soviet years, they never really got around to a full accounting. I think it's kind of thought the reason they didn't do that is that the Soviet records, they always wanted to have this number of 8 or 9 million Soviets dying in the war. And that's sort of, I guess they figured that's a number that sounds pretty hardcore, pretty sacrificial,
But we aren't asking questions. How did you kill all these people?
But it's not. But what they found out since is like, no, closer to 30 million Soviet citizens died, which means that. So when you get to that kind of number, it's like, okay, heroism for the Rodina and blithering incompetence. So they wanted to keep that number. I guess the official war dead from the 40s that they acknowledged was 8 or 9 million dead No,
I've heard if you were born in 1918, you had a 20% chance of being alive in
um,
45 or something like that.
the worst year is, it's funny. Were you here for the battle?
Yeah,
Remember the old guy that got the flag? He's 100 years old.
yeah.
That is the year group that had the worst casualties. He was born in 1923. Your most deadly year group to be in for the Soviet Army is year group 1943. It's those poor bastards that turned 18 in 1941, because guys older than them are already in the Soviet Army, or they've already mustered in. They've had some training.
So these guys just went straight in the meat grinder,
Right, straight into the meat grinder, with or without weapons.
and they didn't let them out.
Well, they couldn't. I mean, they needed the soldiers. So have you ever seen the opening scene of Enemy at the Gates, where there's a movie? It's done like early '90s, I think, but
I'm familiar
it's
with the movie. I never
pretty
watched
hideous,
it.
the start of it, and you think of it as like, this is just garish. There's no way this is true. Actually, war veterans from the war looked at it, were shuddered, because they were like, no, that's exactly how it happened. That's exactly how it happened. You were herded into transports across the river. You were shoved, in these transports. Half the guys with weapons, half not, and they would try and pull you across the river under shelling, Stukas diving and strafing you. And probably a third of the men on those barges were dead by the time the barge hit the western shore, and everybody else ran in. The survivors ran in. Commissars and commanders would just grab them, blow whistles, and point them the direction they were going to try and drive the Germans back. And it's a garish scene, but apparently, from what veterans say, it's like, that's exactly how it happened.
They say they weren't even really out of weapons. They just weren't good at sending them where they needed them.
Well, because everything was such a hurry, it was such a rush. They're shoving so many men at the problem that, and what they would tell them, and it was effective, is, okay, keep running forward. When the man in front of you is killed, grab his weapon, keep moving forward. And some of them were given ammo, some of them weren't. It was just literally running by supply tables, grabbing shit, and being pointed, because the attack's going in now, because otherwise the Germans pushed them to the river and the city is lost. I mean, it was how desperate it was.
Okay, so what was your name?
Tom Niemeyer.
Tom Emar. Okay.
So your group 1941, or your group 1923. The guys born in 1923 is the kids that turned 18. There's nobody left. The only people left in Russia from that generation are probably women, because if you look at the mortality of Russians anyway, they don't live long. Just their lifestyle, they don't live longer much. Men don't live much longer than 65 still in the 21st century. So to have a guy who's 100 years old, almost guaranteed he served in the war, and he was probably, again, one of those young guys shoved in almost no training, because the timing of it, actually, most of their Soviets, the same thing as the Soviet Cold War cycle. I think one of their big intakes is in the spring, right before the war. They took in the first big intake of 18-year-olds into the army. So yeah, they did. Those guys actually had time, a few weeks to, get to know the other guys in the unit, because they're flushing out the units in the West, and the Germans aren't going to attack. But in case they do, well, we got to dig in here and cross our fingers, hopefully it won't happen. Yeah, that's the year group that there's probably nobody left. I mean, you see how few Americans we got left. We live a lot longer. Yeah, that was the year group that I think I've seen charts on it. It's like, there's virtually nobody left, because they were just eviscerated after 4 years of war. If you survived the first year, well, okay, congratulations. Now you're a corporal or a sergeant in 1942. Maybe you're a lieutenant in 1943 if you've survived a few more battles. You might be commanding a battalion. You might be a junior captain by the end of the war, and you're 21 years old. 21, 22 years old.
Because you're the survivor.
Right. You're the guy that survived enough battles and kind of learned, by the school of hard knocks. So and believe me, they probably look like the old man too at age 20. There's the German movie, the recent production, All Quiet on the Western Front, kind of shows that the main character it's from the Germans' perspective, and the main character, and he shows them going off to war in 1914, 18-year-old kid, just, oh, hey, all right, everybody's like, really excited about, this adventure they're going to go on. And by the end of the war, he's the platoon sergeant. Actually, by late in the war, like 17 or 18, he's standing in front. He's the platoon sergeant with 30 guys behind him. All of his buddies are dead. Every single one of them are dead, and he's the old man. He's 21, but he's the old man. basically second in command of a 30-man platoon.
Yeah, it's something else.